Welcome. Thanks everyone for being with us this afternoon. My name is Doug Smith. I'm with Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative, and this is our behavior cadre, our quarterly behavior cadre. And today's topic is going to be a brief overview of FBA, Functional Behavior Assessment, and a Behavior Intervention Plan, or BIP. These forms were created by the Kentucky's SERTAC task group for behavior. So these are kind of some new streamlined forms. They've been out a couple of years, but we just want to do an overview of these and briefly talk about those. Again, thank you for being with us, and we'll get started. So as we think about completing a functional behavior assessment and creating, analyzing that data and that information and developing a behavior intervention plan, a lot of times we look like the folks on the bottom corner, left corner there, eyes all wide, mouth open. Oh my goodness, what is an FBA? How do we do this? Who's going to write this? How do I write a behavior intervention plan? So forth and so on. And if you've seen any of the older forms, uh, you can see the frustration and you can feel that frustration. Hopefully with the information that we covered today and just an overview of these uh, forms or documents, that is a data gathering process, and then you look like the folks up in the upper right hand corner by the time we get through with this process. Excited, work together as a team. I built I found out the function behind the behavior and developed a behavior intervention plan based on that function of the behavior. So hopefully we can streamline this uh, task and make it a more beneficial for you by using these forms that have been created. So, what are some thoughts if anyone's ever completed an FBA using the older forms that are in the Infinite Campus? These have been around uh, several years, and they were developed again as well by the task group years ago. So, just what are your thoughts on these? Can even
Hey Doug, it's good to see you and Chastity again. It's been a while since I have looked at these forms, but I do remember in my past life completing these forms, and it just seemed like a lot. And usually you were completing them, um, and sometimes it was the aftermath of a behavior event with the student, and so I don't you're honestly not really 100% with it. I think sometimes we fill them out in haste, and I think that's not a good thing either. And we always struggled with who completes what. That was always a concern of ours. Like as a special ed case manager supposed to do it, or I don't know. That was just some thoughts that I always had about it. But again, it's been a couple years since I have completed one of these in real time, in real life.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. It's good to see you too, Miss Tara. Yes, and one of the things too, these forms were often redundant. You could copy and paste pretty much what you're doing, and it's the same guided questions, and you just, I mean, yeah, they were redundant, they were cumbersome, they were confusing. Like you said, often difficult to decide who fills out what, who collects what data, uh, things like that. So if you think about completing an FBA and developing a behavior intervention plan, it's usually a team effort. One person can't do all the work by themselves. There's a lot of information you have to gather, a lot of data you have to collect, and several things like that. It's not just a one and done situation where one person does it all and they write a beautiful plan. It has to be a team effort and team approach. So yeah, I was agree with you. These things are really kind of difficult to understand, and then once you get them written, it's like, okay, so what's the plan? We developed an FBA and we filled out all this stuff on the behavior intervention plan, but we've not got to the point where we've written the goals or we've done anything like that. So
It
Hopefully
was
this.
kinda like it was like, "Then what? Okay, now
Yeah.
we filled this stuff out, now what?" And a lot of times, I mean, in districts, we don't have a lot of guidance. We're just kinda flying, hoping to do the best we can.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yes, that's true. That's a very good point. Then what? Uh, so so we, like I said, we looked at these. Task group looked at these, and they used the Tate, which is hold on a second. And these forms got the technical adequacy tool for evaluation of FBAs and BIPs. We use that uh, document or that information to develop these forms aligned with the Tate. So each step along the forms that we have numbered or yeah listed do align with the Tate, and it answers certain questions about that. And you can use that tool to determine if you have a evidence-based, I guess, FBA and a behavior intervention plan. So, and these forms can be accessed at, like I said, kybehavior.com. Uh, you'll go onto that web page, and it'll take you to the page. You come up, and there's a section that says special ed resources. You click on that section, and it pulls up the BIP and or the FBA and the BIP forms. So let's quickly look at, like I said, when we're looking at improved outcomes of the FBA, we use the technical adequacy tool for evaluation of FBAs and BIPs. And the very first thing that we want to look at is looking at, well, the first thing on the forms, of course, is the demographics, the top part that you fill out. It just has student's name, date of birth, social security number, so forth and so on. Uh, so the first thing that we have to do is we have to operationally define the problem behavior or the behavior of concern. So a lot of times, when we're defining that behavior, we got to think about what is the behavior that we're looking at. What is that objectively define that behavior? How are we going to define that behavior? How are we going to let people know what that behavior is? And when we're defining a behavior, we have to define it in a way that is measurable, observable, and objective. That way, this behavior can be seen, it can be heard, it can be counted. It's specific and it is replicable across observers and across settings. And you should focus on one behavior at a time because it's kind of difficult to write a behavior plan for three or four different behaviors when they may be totally different on total different aspects. So look at one behavior at a time. And if you need to, use separate forms for each behavior. Now, one thing that I didn't mention about when I was introducing these, I'll go back a second. If you notice on the forms, there's a section after in parentheses it says tips. Well, on the form that you download, when you open this up, it automatically downloads to your desktop. So if you hover over that section, just hover your arrow or your pointer, or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to click on it, but it'll bring up tips on how to complete that section and what are some things that should be in that section. So when we're looking at after we've defined it, so example on this slide, the IEP tip is for a student with an IEP, the ARC should define a problem behavior in a present level of performance and check yes for the considerations of special factors for behavior. So, and in this box, this is an example. This is a specific definition of a young man that was a case study was completed on. Name is Lucas. So, Lucas shouts, makes loud remarks, and uses profanity. So, we would make that so specific that anyone that walked into that classroom would know what that behavior was and know what we're trying to address and how we're trying to change that behavior. Next thing that you want to do is you're going to have to take some baseline data. And then going back to the data types and sources, and it says check at least two data types. Direct observations is best practice. So some of the things that you would want to do could possibly do indirect observations or indirect data such as interviews, rating scales. You could also do direct observations, which I like to do. using the ABC format, antecedent behavior consequence, or I like using the anecdotal observations, and then after I do an observation, then summarize that observation and put it into a way that it's usable when looking at the data. And then you could also do record reviews such as current IEPs or current placement decisions, the use of psychologicals, current testing, look at attendance, you could look at grades, you could look at discipline, several different types of data you could use as far as record review. And also always look at progress monitoring, IEP and progress monitoring. So then after we've defined the behavior, we have to take some baseline data, and that baseline data is going to determine uh, what are what is the appropriate measurement of the data that we're collecting? Is it going to be a frequency count? Is it a behavior that has a definite beginning and a definite end? And how many times does that student perform that behavior or show that behavior within a certain time period? It could be as often as uh, out of their seat, walking around the room. You can see how many times they get up out of their seat, walk around the room. Now you have to determine that behavior or define that behavior in a way that it is observable and measurable. And anyone that comes into that classroom, if the kid gets up to go sharpen a pencil, that's different than just being up out of their seat, walking around. So you would have to define that in a way that it is when you're collecting or counting those tallies, how often that occurs, it is in a way that everyone understands it's what you're looking at. You could also look at duration. When we're looking at duration, we often look at students off task, put their head down on their desk, or uh, pull their hoodie up over their head, or uh, start, little fellows a tantrum. How long does that tantrum? It has a beginning, has an end, and there's a length of time in between. So, what is that duration? How long does that behavior last? And then you could also look at latency. If you give them a command, ask them to do something, ask them to, for instance, open their book, page 15, and do the first couple problems, or copy the first three sentences. So I give that direction or that instruction, and how long does it take before that student starts or initiates that task? And when we're looking at task initiation, you're looking at executive function skills, and then you're also looking at social emotional learning competencies according to Castle. So those are some things that you look at, and you want to use recent data. You want to use data within around the last 30 days or so, and then you want to make sure that you collect that data and monitor that. Baseline data provides you with that comparison point to determine if the effectiveness of the intervention is meeting the need of the student. So this one is the baseline data for the problem behavior is during a small group, independent grade level math, look as a shout, make inappropriate noises or profanities 7 times as measured by frequency count. So uh, that tells that's their baseline. So we want that number of interruptions or distractions or that difficult inappropriate behavior. We want the number of times that occurs to decrease. So we have 7 times on an average 7 times. So if we get that, we may not extinguish that behavior completely, but if we drop it down to 3 times or 2 times within a couple 3 weeks or so, depending on the strategy that we're using, then we can determine if that has been an effective strategy, or if we're wasting our time and need to do something else. Then we have to look at some of the things after that. We got to consider the relevant information about regarding setting events. And with setting events, I'm not talking about just being in the where you're at that moment. I'm looking at things that have happened, in the past or that are going on currently. And some of those setting events could be, for example, it could be medication, some background information. They may have sensory needs, might have communication needs. family dynamics. Is there substance abuse? Is there incarcerated family members? Mental health or physical health conditions that we need to know about? Have the students been abused or neglected? So there's several things you can find out as far as setting events. Now, setting events are those things that happen to the student that's kind of beyond our control. We can kind of identify and look at some variables that increase the likelihood of a behavior occurring. And those are setting events. Like I said, it's not the environment that they're immediately in, but it's the things that have led up to uh, the student being in your classroom. Some of those could be environmental stressors, physiological factors such as sleep, medication we talked about briefly, and some prior events. Situation I was in before, we had students that would work toward having a home visit, or they'd have a family member come visit or something like that. And sometimes they would get so either excited that they would do something to lose that visit, or they'd be so nervous and anxious and not want that visit to occur, but not want to tell staff that, so they'd do something to lose that privilege. So you have to look at what's going on outside of the school ground. What's some background information that we have on our kiddos, and then setting events inside the school. Look at hunger. You could be such things as again looking at conflicts at school, conflicts outside of school, uh, changing schedule or routine. Uh, so how many of our kiddos get tore up if there is a change in their schedule during that day or change in their routine? So look at those setting events, look at what's going on outside of the classroom besides the immediate environment that you're in. So the immediate environment that you're in, we're looking at are kind of to be looked at as an antecedent event. So antecedents are what happens immediately before the behavior, what happens immediately before the unwanted or inappropriate behavior, and what are we going to do, or what can we do to address that? So, what are some antecedents that you can think of that is most likely to trigger or to cause a behavior to be used? And then think about, okay, so in what setting is this behavior least likely to occur? And then so the settings that it's least likely to occur is going to provide us with information where that student can be more successful and have more appropriate interactions with staff and peers. So, what are some of those antecedent events? What are some things that may possibly predict or trigger that problem behavior? And so antecedents, like I said, happen immediately before the behavior, and those are sometimes things that you can control. Then you, like I said, look at where is it most likely to occur and where is it least likely to occur. And then after you have your antecedents, then you have the behavior. Then the next thing that you want to talk about or think about is the what are the consequences? Now, the consequences isn't just I sent them to the office, or I made them take a time out, or they were suspended from school for 2 days, or they weren't allowed. They had to be picked up early. Those aren't necessarily consequences. When we're talking about consequences, when you're looking at antecedent behavior and consequence, you're looking at how do I respond immediately after that behavior. If the antecedent is I present a little Dougie with a math handout that has 20 problems on it, and he can it's multiplication, and he can only recognize numbers to three, and its addition is the best that he can do. Then you present me with that math sheet. That's the antecedent. My behavior, I'm going to rip it up. I'm going to wad it up. I'm going to throw it on the floor. I'm going to say some bad words or have some inappropriate actions, and then see what kind of consequence I get from it. And that consequence either, uh, like I said, it occurs immediately after behavior. It can either increase the likelihood of that behavior occurring again, or it can decrease the likelihood of that behavior occurring again. So the consequences that we think about are some things that could be adult attention. It could be removal of the task, or it could be a modifying the task, or it could be accommodating aiding me by letting allow me to use a calculator. Or so those could be some of the consequences. Or like I said, now one thing that you got to be aware of is sometimes unintended reinforcement is often common with their students, and you got to think about that. So, for instance, when I rip my paper up, throw it in the trash, you may say, "Well, I can do, I can keep that behavior from occurring by just saying, oh, you don't have to, don't worry about it. I'll come over and you can just do a couple of these and we'll be done." Now, that consequence is just going to reinforce me ripping my paper up and throwing it in the trash if I'm looking for adult attention, I'm looking for help, I'm looking for escape from having to do the assignment. So be aware that your consequences may have the adverse effect of what you think that they would have on the student. So, and if we're looking at uh, uh, if we're looking at the consequences, some of those things, are we looking at the function? What is that student getting? What is the payoff, or what works for that student? So there's some primary purposes for behaviors, and those are, as you may be aware of, are escape and avoidance. They are attention, access to items or activities, and some may be sensory or automatic, and some of it could be some medical reasons that our students behave in the way that they behave. So we have to determine what is the function of the behavior. What is the student either accessing or obtaining or getting, and what are they either escaping or avoiding or delaying. And so just determine what is the function of the behavior. And and then we would look at, so for Lucas, when he screams and yells, they remove him from small group. And so he escapes independent small group math activities. So when we're writing our final step of completing an FBA after you've gathered the information, and that's the I think the difficult thing is trying to determine uh, what information to gather, how you're going to document that information, and then how are you going to analyze and review that data to help you write a hypothesis statement and help you to develop a behavior intervention plan. So our hypothesis statement is, it could be as simple as during or when, it's the setting event or the antecedent, which we've got from the previous information that we gathered, the student, uh, what behavior will they exhibit, and then what is the reason behind that behavior. So, for instance, this is during independent small group grade level math work, Lucas will shout profanities and make loud remarks to avoid working independently or in small groups, and to avoid grade level mathematics. So that is that's the hypothesis or the statement of the FBA. So basically, it boils down to this is what we found when we conducted the FBA. So now that we have that information, what are some next steps? What are other things we need to do? So the student's behavior requires a new or updated uh, positive behavior intervention plan, or the students does not require a new plan, or uh, there's not enough information at this time to develop a behavior intervention plan. So hopefully we've come to the conclusion that we're going to develop a new or updated FBA. Any questions so far on the FBA? Like I said, FBA. Like I said, I went through that rather quickly, just briefly. The most difficult part for me is making sure that everyone understands it as a team effort, not just one person, not just the person that has that student on their, I guess, caseload or whatever, or is responsible for that student's folder. It's not just that person that completes an FBA. It's a team effort, and there's several different data that you have to collect and analyze. So remember that it's a team effort. developing and completing a behavior intervention plan. So, and again, this can be accessed at kybehavior.com. So again, we looked at the tape to help develop the behavior intervention plan. Now, these numbers up here uh, will not, they don't correlate with the numbers boxes in the actual paperwork itself. So just I'll correct that. Don't pay any attention to those numbers. So first thing that we want to do is the hypothesis statement from the FBA, and then that just brings it completely across from uh, step 8 of your FBA. Uh, and the behavior intervention plan must directly reflect the defined behavior and hypothesis, because if we have a hypothesis of the student is making loud remarks and using profanity to escape work, and then we use a behavior intervention plan to increase the amount of time the student's on task. Well, the function of the behavior was to avoid the task. So, how's that behavior intervention plan going to address avoiding task instead of time on task, or instead of something that you frequency count? So, make sure that the FBA and the BIP are aligned. If not, you're just spinning your wheels, I guess you could say. So this is again brought straight over from the FBA, box 8 on the FBA. It goes during or when, what was the setting event, what was the antecedent, what did the student do, what was the problem behavior or the interfering behavior that we saw, and what did the student either get or avoid by using that behavior that maintained their use of that behavior. So next we want to look at are some antecedent setting event strategies. All right, these are some things that you can do to address, to modify the environmental conditions to reduce the likelihood of the behavior or to increase the likelihood of the behavior. Some behaviors we see we want to increase and we don't really think about those. We just think about the ones that we are trying to decrease or trying to change it that way. So look at those behaviors that you want to increase as well. And then find those positives and definitely play to those strengths that our students have. So some environmental conditions that you could adapt or change could be a task. You can modify the task. You could have an increased more supervision, more monitoring, increased structure, increased adult presence. Have pre-correction and prompting, and also use behavior-specific praise. Encourage students to use those positive behaviors that you want to see, but instead of saying "good job," let them know exactly what you're praising them for. Then, oftentimes we have to do, uh, reminders of what our classroom rules and expectations, especially after a few days off. Christmas break, spring break, snow break, uh, summer, all those breaks. It's just like starting the school year over for summer kiddos. So make sure that you review your rules and expectations, and practice those again and reteach those if you need to. So then our next thing we'll want to talk briefly about. So and sometimes antecedent or set event strategies, kiddos may miss the bus, may get to school late, and they've missed breakfast. And so I've had kids come into the classroom, didn't get breakfast, all out of sorts because first they missed the bus, threw their routine off, then they missed breakfast. Now what they're going to do? They're hungry, so have them a little snack or have some way that they can go back to the cafeteria or something and grab whatever they had for breakfast. I'm sure that there's you as educators. I'm sure you've got a cabinet or desk drawer full of goodies for when kiddos come in without or hungry or things like that. So just some of those things, just be prepared for. Uh, so next thing that we want to do is we need to think about what is a socially valid replacement behavior. Now, replacement behavior are those things that we can live with, uh, you know, momentarily until the student has uh, perfected that replacement behavior, or has not really perfected, but uses it, uh, routinely. Now let's guide them a little bit closer to the expected or desired behavior. Replacement behaviors shouldn't last a long time. I mean, they should be things that they're going to serve the same function as the problem or behavior, and but they're going to be a more socially acceptable alternative to that problem behavior. And then you also need to, when I use that replacement behavior, you're going to have to teach that replacement behavior. It's going to have to be functionally equivalent to what they're already using undesired behavior for. Has to be developmentally appropriate and efficient for the student and for the staff as well. Behavior change requires instruction, not just redirection. So you have to teach those students what behavior you want to see, and how to use or implement that replacement behavior. But it has to be taught. And that's one thing that we got to think about. Who and how are we going to teach that replacement behavior? The next thing that we want to think about is uh, some replacement behaviors, some reinforcement strategies. How are we going to reinforce or reward the desired or replacement behaviors? Immediate specific praise and feedback, and behavior specific praise. Consistently use the reward system or reinforcement system for the replacement behavior, because if I don't recognize that replacement behavior, and I don't encourage that student to use that behavior, and I don't, like I said, reward or acknowledge that, so you're going to get the inappropriate behavior that you're trying to address anyway. So make sure, it's very difficult to do, but make sure that it is a functionally equivalent replacement behavior, and it's easy for the student to do, and you remind them and you praise them and you recognize them using that behavior as often as possible. So some other things that we want to talk about are consequence strategies or reactive strategies, and then it's how do we respond to that behavior. Again, like I was saying, so we want to establish consistent, neutral responses to problem behavior. Don't get too worked up over it. A calm, business-like manner, monotone, I guess you could say straight to the point. Just tell them, all right, guys, this is the behavior that I expect from you. These are things that I expect you to be able to do in my classroom. And so you have to change how you respond to that behavior. In order to change a behavior, you change how you respond to that behavior, not how the student responds, but how you respond to that student using that behavior. That's where we get change. That's how we get change. We can't change them or control them. We can provide them with the strategies and ideas and interventions to help control or help change or help manage their behavior. But the only one that you can control or manage is yourself. So how you respond to that student when they use that replacement behavior or that desired behavior or the inappropriate behavior is what you're going to see. What are your however you're responding, and whatever you're reinforcing or rewarding as the behavior that you're going to see. Oh, and some strategies are pre-teach, pre-correct, graphic organizers, just consequence reminders, maybe expectation reminders, things like that. Those are all different ways that you can change the way that you respond to a behavior. But like I said, don't take it personal. Try to keep a calm, easy, neutral uh, uh, response, and encourage appropriate behavior. So the next thing we'll briefly hit on in the behavior intervention plan, if needed, sometimes it may not be needed, and hopefully it's not very often, is a crisis or a safety plan. So and when we're looking at our crisis or safety plan, we want to look at some of the things that, if a plan is needed, so then these are some of the things that we want to look at. If you look at the bottom of this page, phases, stages of escalation, calm. What does the student do while they're calm? How does the teacher respond? What does staff do? Now, calm is just normal baseline behavior. Stimulation, agitation, they're starting to get just a little antsy, maybe moving papers around a little bit, maybe starting to squirm around in their seat a little bit, rustling the papers and clicking pens, dropping pencils, things like that. Then you have the escalation or acceleration. During that stage, everything gets a little bit louder. The feet start stomping. The papers might start. Oh, this is dumb. Why do I have to do this? I'll never use this in my life. And they throw the papers in the floor, things like that. It's starting to escalate, starting to become a little more agitated, I guess you could say. And then you have the crisis or the peak of explosion or out of control period. The main thing for staff to do at that point is to try to ensure safety. Try to make sure, if you need to, clear the room or get the student out of the room. Whatever you need to do to ensure safety for you or for the student. Sorry, the student first, for the student, other students in the classroom, and yourself. And also during this time, this is not time to be trying to rationalize or direct or teach during this time. This is students, when you get upset and angry, you don't hear anything that's going on when you're in that out of control setting or out of control situation. Our students are the same way. So it's best to use words that are less than 5 letters long, and then less than 5 words per sentence is the best way to handle that situation. And it's usually mostly at that time directives to keep them safe. Stop, slow down, breathe, thank you, whatever those things are. Just kind of make sure that it's quiet. You're not trying to rationalize, talk to them, or anything like that. You're just giving them those mans to help them stay safe. And then after that, they usually, the de-escalation period or the recovery. De-escalation is when they're coming down. Some kiddos may have to take a nap. I mean, being upset and wore out, and tired, and yelling, and screaming, and exploding like that. It wears you out. Wears some kiddos out. So they may want to just sit quietly, put their head down. I mean, give them some way that they can save face. They can still, you know, allow them to de-escalate and then re-engage, talk to the students, and then communicate to them about what you saw and get their side of the story, and then kind of develop a plan on what can we do differently the next time. I had a little fellows that they would act out and do some self-interest behaviors, and I'd have to assist them. And then after it was all over with, I just wanted a hug. And I'm like, man, we could have done that a whole different way instead of you turning everything in the room all to pieces. But just tell me the next time. So, and some of the kiddos, that's the only time they get attention, by acting out. So that's all they know to do to get your attention, even if it is for something that they want that's positive. And if you don't need a crisis plan, good shape. Awesome. Don't worry about it. Just skip that section. Our next section is talking about monitoring and evaluation of the IEP. Of course, you want to monitor the IEP. How are you going to determine the effectiveness of it? So you establish a system to evaluate intervention effectiveness over time. I use defined data collection method, schedule review, and certain intervals. Have clear decisions based on the data that is collected. Because if progress is not monitored, the plan can't be adjusted effectively. And if you've tried something for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, usually say give it 4 to 6 weeks, unless it's a really injurious, dangerous behavior. Then you're going to try something. If it doesn't work, you're going to try something differently rather quickly, instead of waiting 4 to 6 weeks to see the effectiveness of it. But just give your strategies, your interventions time to work. Collect that data during that time, and then make changes if needed, or change to a completely different strategy. Continue using the one that you're using if it's helping. I mean, just But if you don't have that data to back it up, or that progress monitoring, I guess you could say, then you're not really going to be able to justify, oh, we don't need to do check in and check out any longer. It didn't work. We tried it for a day and a half. It didn't work. I mean, it's going to take that long just for the kid to get used to what you're doing and how to use that strategy. So make sure you collect that data and monitor the progress the students making with the behavior intervention plan. And then the final thing is you're going to look at the fidelity of implementation, uh, assess the degree to which the plan is implemented as intended. Are the strategies being used consistently across all settings, all staff members, all environments? Are all staff aligned? Do they know what it looks like? Do they know how to mark? And for example, if you're using the check-in and check-out, they have a daily school card or behavior card. Are all staff marking that correctly? Do they understand how that should be rated, and then what are their roles and responsibilities as part of that implementation of that check-in and check-out strategy. And are additional supports needed? What else is there additional training needed for staff? Do we need additional resources? Do we need additional PDs available? So, what are some different things or different supports that are needed? It may be something as simple as a a communication board, which is just could be pictures on a uh, vanilla uh, manila folder with Velcro dots on it that they can move and help communicate. So, what are some of the words that you want to use with that? So, what are some additional supports needed? And then after that, implementation fidelity is often a determining factor in success. If one person is implementing with fidelity and no one else is, the strategy that you're using probably won't be effective. The behavior intervention plan probably won't work across all settings and all environments. So just think about that and make sure that you uh, do some follow up and look at the implementation of the behavior intervention plan. A couple of key things to think about, and then we'll open for some questions or comments if you have any. So, behavior serves a function, and it's often influenced by the environment. So, the functions of behavior, two main functions of behavior are to get, or to gain, or to avoid, or to escape. So, get something or to avoid something. Think about it. Now, of course, like I said, we talked about sensory, we talked about medical, we talked about some other things as well. But just think about what's the student getting out of this behavior by using this behavior, or what are they avoiding by using this behavior? The functional behavior assessment identifies the why. Why is this behavior being used? While the behavior intervention plan addresses how. How are we going to uh, intervene with this student to ensure that they are successful in school and out of school as well? Prevention and instruction are more effective than reaction. So use those preventative measures rather than those reactive measures. And then consistency across staff is essential. And also, data, not opinions, helps to drive the decision making. An effective FBA and a behavior intervention plan process is not about completing a document. If you think about it, it's about creating a plan that works in real classrooms for real students, implemented consistently with fidelity by real staff. Just like to say thanks everyone for being here and for participating. And if you need any assistance, uh, anything at all, any help with these things, how to find the forms, how to find some data gathering information, what do I use? Just send me an email, and I'll try to answer the questions as soon as possible. And just again, thanks everyone for being with us, and I appreciate you. My name is Doug Smith. This has been the Behavior Cadre with an overview of the FBA to BIP forms, and it's Doug.Smith at theholler.org or doug.smith@hazard.kyschools.us. See you folks. Thanks everyone.